Welcome to Recharge. We're so excited. First week of April here, coming out of our April Fool's joke on the church this past Sunday. That was kind of fun. And I didn't get any hate mail yet. And I keep waiting for Judy Stevenson to show up at my house and slap me like Will Smith did Chris Rock. But if you were here at 11, we were not supposed to draw an actual number of a person who had it. And Judy Stevenson's number got drawn, and she thought she won $1 million, and she did not win $1 million. So, anyway, if you don't know what I'm talking about, you'll have to go back and watch or listen to the sermon. Then you'll know. So, tonight I'm so excited to have Tom Dyson here with us, and we got a new setup. We got some real podcast mics. So those of you who are listening on podcasts are probably already telling something's different here. It sounds cool. So, we're pretty excited about that, and we're going to really start working hard promoting the podcast section of this, which is on Spotify, Google, and Apple Podcasts. So those of you who do listen to it that way, help us out and push that out on your social media because we really think this is a great educational tool for people trying to understand and learn the Bible. This year, we're doing a survey of the Old Testament where we're actually spending a few weeks in Genesis, but we're going to overview every single book in the Old Testament to help you have a big picture idea of its doctrine, what it's about. We're not trying to teach you the whole book. We're trying to teach you enough about the book that when you read it yourself, it really can come to life and you can put things together better. So in doing that, we decided this was a great opportunity for the pastors, the pastoral team at Venture, to participate and be kind of the main bulk of the teachers and turn me into the MC, which I'm still learning how to do. I'm not good at it. I talk too much. So tonight, you're actually getting to hear Tom Dyson. Last week, you filled in for me as the MC.
Yep.
And we were in Baton Rouge for my wife's grandmother's funeral, which was just an amazing celebration of Jesus in heaven. It went amazing. But tonight, you're going to get to hear from him from the teaching seat. And so I want you to hear a little bit about his background. His wife's here, and you've got kids literally all over the world right now. And so tell us a little bit about your family, your story, and catch us up to 2022 life of the Dyson family.
Okay, well, I'll try to start back in, I guess it was the late 90s, early 20s. We were living in eastern North Carolina. And we really felt a call on our lives to go as missionaries overseas, and it became clear where we were to go. We got involved with the Southern Baptist, the International Mission Board, set us up, prepared us, took us over to Venezuela is where we started. We did a 2-year term in Venezuela, did some language school in Costa Rica, and then we were sent to the indigenous of southern Mexico. And that was quite an interesting time there. We had a good opportunity to reach out to the many tribes in that area that don't speak Spanish.
Oh, wow.
So we had to come up with some kind of a strategy to reach all those because there's like 165 languages right in that region there.
Wow.
Many places still unreached, many places where really the gospel is not allowed. I mean, it's literally dangerous to be there as a Christian. So we had an opportunity to work with a small seminary there to build a team of Mexican nationals that were ready to learn how to cross into a completely different culture, to a completely different language, work on learning that language, and living in these places where initially they were not allowed to go.
Yeah.
And just using good techniques. I studied intercultural studies at Southeastern, which was just an excellent preparation to be able to work with them in their villages some, and prepare them to be able to go and do that successfully. And it was just a beautiful thing to see the gospel going forth that way in an area where it just wasn't.
Well, yeah, and to think that these are people group. This is a non-Spanish.
Right.
They speak English, sir?
No,
Yeah.
speak English.
So a non-Spanish, non-English area in Mexico. You don't really hear much about that. That's
Well, Spanish in many cases is the trade language. So some of the men that come out from the villages to do trade have some Spanish. It's usually not great Spanish.
Yeah.
And back in the village, especially the older folks and a lot of the people living there are just in their indigenous language. It'd be Zapotec or a number of other languages.
And so before we get too far into this, in case those of you we lose, we talked about this earlier, You actually have one daughter who's in the Ukraine.
She is right now. She's
Won't
serving.
say her name or
All right.
town or city or any of that stuff or whatever. I don't want to cross any lines I'm not supposed to.
But she's serving with a team with a Samaritan's Purse, and she's there now as a nurse.
As a nurse, and we'll just say she is not off at a Pentagon resort.
Definitely not.
She is in the midst of war.
Right.
And we need to be praying for her and your family.
Please do.
I can only imagine as a dad. I've just, since you told me that, I've just kind of sat around what goes through the mind of a dad.
But in this case, with confidence I have a lot of confidence in her spiritual life. I know this is with prayer. I know this is where she believes she should be. And that gives us a lot of peace too.
Yeah.
She's doing what she believes she should be doing.
And what a testimony of what Christians have done since day one. I mean, in Rome, when early in the first century early church history, they had a pandemic of some sort of thing where people were dying all over the place. And basically, they were just sticking these folks in places because if you got with them, you were going to die as well in this plague. And the Christians were the ones who ran into these facilities and ministered to these people, knowing that they were putting their own lives on the line. And that in this particular deal, in this plague, highly likely that they were going to die too. And it turned the head of so many people that the ones who were willing to go and serve and love others in an almost guaranteed outcome in that scenario, went with joy and smiles and passion and focus to testify the love of Christ and serve. And it's just neat to, 2 millenniums later, still seeing Christians just with confidence defined by their love for Christ and their belief in eternity, and boom, going right out and serving the Lord. It's just so, man, it's so amazing.
She normally lives in the Dominican Republic serving Haitians, and the Samaritan's Purse took her out of there and took her to Ukraine.
And sent her there, and off she went. I'm guessing they probably didn't have to beg.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
I believe she's where she thinks she should be. Yeah. She signs right up and steps in.
Had the opportunity of meeting her one time. It was a few months ago, wasn't
it?
Yes. Yeah. And didn't strike me as the person who would have to be begged to go into a serious place to serve the Lord. So
you'd have to do some serious begging to keep her from it.
Yeah, I was going to say it's probably the reverse. Yeah. So hey, well, let's get.
Try.
Yeah. That would just made it worse. Yeah,
That's right.
Don't go. Oh, all right. Well, now I'm going to leave even quicker. Well, hey, we are studying the book of Genesis the last couple weeks, and just to catch you up, for those that's your first one, the book of Genesis, first book of your Bible, you're probably aware of that, and a lot of people never make it past Genesis, but Genesis was written together with some other books. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy were all written by a man named Moses, as he was getting the people ready to go into what we call Canaan, the promised land, that God had promised the people of Israel, and that they were going to establish a nation there, that God was going to establish them as a nation, and through them he was going to bless the nations. So what God is using Moses to do is to establish the correct doctrine, first and foremost. Pharaoh is not God. They'd been there for hundreds of years. And so they understand that right out of the gate, Genesis 1 and 2. God is creator, he is sovereign, he's all powerful, and he's a covenantal God named Yahweh in Genesis 2 that you can know personally, and he wants to know you. And but then we get into the fall of man and the sin that mankind committed through Adam, and God kicks Adam out of this covenant relationship, and we see that fall spiral out of control from murder between the two sons of Adam and Eve. And then we have the Tower of Babel. We've got everything that goes on with. I mean, it's just one mess after the next throughout the story of Genesis. God destroys the earth with a flood and makes a covenant through Noah. And so all this, but then man just goes right back to the same disaster. And so we end up with Babel. We end up with all this crazy mess. God then raises up a man named Abram. One of our AVL crew here tonight is named Abram. And so I thought that was kind of cool. He was like, hey, we're studying Genesis. So God raised up a man named Abram, calls him out. Abram was a pagan who followed God. It had to be a fun day for Abram. First time God ever, he's been worshiping gods his whole life, and now one speaks. And speaks to Abram, calls him out, and Abram follows, obeys. Eventually God renames him to Abraham. And makes a very clear covenant with Abraham that through his descendants, he's going to bless all the nations of the earth. And so then Abraham has some sons. We're going to mention both of them tonight, Ishmael and Isaac. We're going to get into that in a minute. Ishmael kind of pops his way back into the story eventually. But Isaac becomes a very important figure. He has a son named Jacob and another one named Esau. And so we're going to get into all that tonight. So tonight we're picking up in Genesis 25, where we left off last week in 24. But before we do, the original purpose of Moses writing this is to establish the people of God that he understood as the descendants of Abraham, the ones that he's telling us all about. But now that Jesus is alive, that Jesus died on a cross and rose from the grave, the mystery has been revealed that it wasn't about Israel. It was about something much more important. And help us, launch us into this by helping them understand that, because you don't want to miss this truth.
Right, and that's where we're going to take off from here. First of all, I just want to point out one thing that's so important to me about Genesis and the Old Testament in general. You think about it, God incarnate, walking on the earth, Jesus himself, he knew the Old Testament. He knew Genesis.
Yeah.
He never had to correct the history on anything. We have confirmation.
Yes.
Of all that material, which I just think is beautiful. The Bible here, it doesn't just, Genesis just doesn't teach us about the nature and expectations of God. It's about the human history of Jesus himself. Jesus had a human, natural, physical mother. He had a human, legal father, even though it wasn't by blood.
Yep.
And in Luke 3:23 to 3:38 in the book of and in the book of Matthew as well, we find the same complicated family that we read about here in Genesis in the ancestor list of ancestors, genealogy of Jesus himself. Jesus, through David, through the tribe of Judah, back to those we're reading about in these stories.
And didn't hide from it.
No.
What you go, well, what's the big deal that he didn't hide from it? Well, you're about to find out.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
It is not, no one in their right mind would intentionally make this story up.
That's right.
There's nothing about, so far, some of you that have been for the first time reading Genesis go, oh, this flood, that's made up. I see why they would do that. No, I can see what. There's no rational reason to why you would do what we're getting ready to see here.
That's right.
This is, unless you wanted to write a soap opera. Now, if you want
Sure.
to do a daytime soap opera, this is a pretty good one to write, but probably not what you would think to write as the foundation of your people and the history of the proud history of your nation. I mean, just think about it, in the United States, we hear about George Washington, and we hear about those who came over, the Pilgrims, and being a good Virginia boy, we got these 3 ships parked over there in Jamestown, and we hear all the inspiring stories. This is a mess. I mean, this story's a mess.
You can say that.
So if you have a hard time believing Genesis as the genuine understanding and inspired story, you just need to stop and go, why else would they write this if it wasn't true?
Sure.
So with that, I want us to get right into this thing. Abraham's had a son named Ishmael that God did not bless. That was through his wife's servant, their arrangement to do something for God. And then God miraculously gives them a son, named Isaac. And so this is where we're picking up in Genesis 25. So start walking us through this.
Okay, well, in the book of Genesis, it has 11, it's called Taldos, and that means this is the account of. There's several of them that count the heavens and the earth, Adam, Noah, but you've got us down here now. We're coming up to Isaac now, where we're talking about this is the account of Isaac, the Taldos of the family line of Isaac, starting in Genesis 25, like you said. Now remember, Isaac was that promised son of Abraham, the one God asked Abraham to sacrifice as a boy, but then he spared him in Genesis 22. It's also the family history of Jesus. Now, as you were just mentioning there, you might expect that to be this long history of all these glorious stories of all these heroes, but these stories are complicated, not so heroic. And just like you said, hey, that's how you tell a story when you're telling the truth. That's not how you tell a story when you're making up a tall tale, that's for sure.
Yeah. I kind of stole your thunder on that. I forgot you were going to talk about that.
Hey, that's fine.
But we're not making it up as we go, I promise.
But first story here. Isaac's wife, Rebekah, he had prayed that she would bear children. And just as he prayed, she did. She had twins. They were rambunctious inside of her. So they were kicking around, and she was asking God, what is going on here? Yeah. And the Lord explained it in Genesis 25:23. 2 nations are in your womb, and the 2 peoples from within you will be separated. One people will be stronger than the other, and the older will serve the younger. Now, that was weird. Mm-hmm. The older doesn't serve the younger typically in this culture. It would be the older that would be served by the younger.
So that prophecy alone had to really turn her head.
That was unusual.
Yeah.
But when they were born, that first one came out. He was red and hairy. That was Esau. Mm-hmm. He was the firstborn. Then came Jacob. He starts his antics right off the bat. He reaches out, grabs a hold of his heel. So right off the start, he's doing some funny business here. Grab the heel of Esau. Now that name Jacob, that's the name they gave him, means heel grabber. It also means cheater or takes another's position. So they really just stuck him with the name right right from the beginning.
This guy's going to be glad his name eventually changes.
Oh, yeah, that's right. So, and that was a big deal being born first, being the firstborn. That wasn't just a little thing. It comes with a birthright. That birthright, that makes you head of the family. And not just head of the family, you get a double share of the inheritance at the end of your father's life.
Yeah, and so for those of you just that are historically challenged, being the head of the family is like being the CEO of the company. The president, not just CEO, the president and owner of the company. So you cannot think in Western modern mentality, like head of the family, that's who says the prayer at Thanksgiving, or like, no, throughout most of world history, head of the family meant the bank account's yours, the family business is yours, the family direction is yours. And for a nomadic tribe, basically, that's just living in tents, moving around, that is a seriously powerful position.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's just shy of a king. It's massively powerful. And so the guy who's supposed to get that's Esau.
Oh, yeah, he was the firstborn. I mean, physically, literally, he was the firstborn. But he already got Jacob grabbing a hold of that heel. So it also comes with a great blessing from the father. At the end of the father's life. That's part of that whole, it's not really the birthright, that's a separate part, but the blessing goes to the firstborn. Well, Jacob wasn't even fully born, and he was grabbing Esau's birthright, trying to grab it.
Yep.
So then, the story continues. Jacob keeps after that birthright. They both grew up. Esau was a rugged hunter, and Isaac liked that. The dad, Isaac, liked that. He liked all that good meat that his son was bringing in. And then Jacob, he hung around the tents. So you can imagine mom kind of favored him.
Yeah,
so
he's mama's boy.
More mama's boy there. That's exactly right. Well, one day Jacob was cooking up some stew, and here comes Esau out of the field. And he's hungry when he gets there. And let's see what he said. Genesis 25:29. Quick, let me have some of that red stew. I'm famished. Now here comes our buddy Jacob with his trickster stuff. First, sell me your birthright. Never misses an opportunity.
Yeah.
Look, I'm about to die, Esau said. What good's a birthright to me? But Jacob said, swear to me first. So he swore an oath to him, selling his birthright to Jacob. Then Jacob gave Esau some bread and some lentil stew. He ate and drank, then got up and left. So Esau despised his birthright for some red stew. Now Esau had to have been pretty honest or something, because in the end, that deal stuck.
Yeah.
He sold it.
Yeah, when I was reading your notes, I thought, I've never really thought about that. If I was Esau, I'd have been like,
what are you talking about?
Man, I don't know what you're talking about. There ain't no witnesses. I didn't give nothing away. But I think it also says something to Esau's character that he didn't care about this birthright.
Right.
It just was not something to him. Did Esau think that Jacob would never hold this over me?
Yeah.
Or did he just not care? Was there an arrogance? We really don't know.
Never contested
we're going
it.
to see some phenomenal humility from Esau eventually in the story.
Right.
But it has always perplexed me that other than just young Esau, young man, cocky, arrogant, must have just been like, just give me the soup. You can have whatever.
Right.
But as you said, I'd never thought about that. He stuck with it.
He stuck with it.
Yeah, and I just never really thought the significance of Esau sticking with that.
No.
Because it doesn't appear to be any witnesses. Yeah.
No.
So
he sold it.
So there's a rival, and you've got conniving Jacob, who is, if I'm Jacob at this point, I'm just saying that's good business. I just got the birthright for a bowl of soup.
Boy.
Like, who else would like a bowl of soup? This guy's got a serious restaurant business.
Yep.
But the problems don't stop there.
No, we got a famine that comes up.
Yeah.
Yep. And this is with God talking to Isaac. This was Jacob and Esau's dad now, Isaac, of course, son of Abraham. Okay, let's read that. Genesis 26, 1 through 5. Talking to Isaac, do not go down to Egypt. Live in the land where I tell you to live. Stay in this land for a while, and I will be with you and will bless you. For to you and your descendants I will give all these lands, and will confirm the oath swore to your father Abraham. I will make your descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky, and will give them all these lands. And through your offspring, all the nations of the earth will be blessed, because Abraham obeyed me and did everything I required of him, keeping my commands, my decrees, and my instructions. So there it is. That promise to Abraham just passed down to Isaac.
Yep.
It sure did. So we're following that promise down through this story.
That promise is repeated to Abraham multiple times. It's given to Isaac. Now it's given to...
Well, we're at Isaac now.
Yeah, we're at Isaac.
We'll get there.
Now, what's interesting is Isaac is told, don't go to Egypt. Now, make this a mental note for next week. Don't go to Egypt because of the famine. I will take care of you. I know things are going to get cray-cray, but don't go to Egypt. Now, Isaac either doesn't communicate this well to Jacob, or Jacob just doesn't care to listen. But they were clearly not, every time they go to Egypt, it gets bad.
Yeah.
Abraham goes to Egypt, has to lie about his wife being his sister, and that's all a mess. It ends well, but it almost doesn't. And so then, if you know a little bit about Genesis, going to Egypt just never works out. This is not a good thing. But it's just interesting to me that promise is that command is very clear to Isaac. Some might argue, well, that wasn't given to Jacob, but I think it's very clearly argued. God said, this is your land, and this is what I'm going to do, and you're to be faithful to that. And as we're going to see next week, Jacob was not, and it created a problem.
Yes.
Anyway, so all right, so famine comes up, and what happens?
Yep. Now we've got another famine here. Isaac goes with Rebekah to the land of Gerar where the Philistine king Abimelech is. So that's where they've gone now. And God tells him to stay there for a time. Now Isaac has a problem.
Yeah.
Rebekah, his wife, apparently she catches men's eyes. So he sees that as a problem. So he says, being the brave man, he says, oh, she's just my sister. So
chip off the old block, because that's what his dad did.
That's what his dad did. So it's happened again. So Abimelech, though, after this goes on a while, Abimelech catches on and says, why in the world did you say she was your sister? He was concerned that one of his men might have slept with her. Then they would have had guilt. Isaac told him, because I thought I might lose my life on account of her.
The ultimate beta man again.
What a man. He's there. So Abimelech ordered the people, anyone who harms this man or his wife shall surely be put to death. And then Isaac, what happened to him? He became rich. Okay. This is an ancestor of Jesus, one of the definite heroes of the faith. He did that. Betrayed his wife like that and then became rich.
Which is exactly again what happened with Abraham. Abraham, when he leaves Egypt, they hook him up with all this stuff and bless him with all these goods and tell him to get out.
So this is a good time to look at a couple of words, descriptive and prescriptive.
Yes.
I think that becomes important at this point. Descriptive tells us what happened. We just got a description of what happened. Right. Prescriptive tells us what we should do. This was not an example of what we should do. No, this is what did happen. So Genesis does not teach you to disown your wife like a coward. That was described, not prescribed. You're a follower of Christ, so this is the instructions to you, prescriptive for you. In Ephesians 5:25, husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. That's prescriptive for us.
Well, and we don't have an example. If you're looking for the example of the truly godly husband, you don't have it in Adam. He stands there and watches Eve.
Oh, yeah.
You don't have it in Abraham. He's constantly doubting God and questioning God and goes along with the idea, okay, well, I'll sleep with your servant. And, just nothing there. And then that's not my wife, that's my sister.
Right.
And now you got Isaac. So we're not getting a good pattern here. So I love the fact that the New Testament doesn't tell us, love your wife like Abraham or David. Or you're like, we can't do that. He was in adultery. Abraham, Jake, no, that's not going to work. So the one we were to love our wife as is how Christ loves us, his church, his bride, and that's our goal. And to you women, you certainly, especially you single ladies, all the single ladies in the house, all the single, you want to find the man who's growing in Christ, but that man is not Jesus. You're not going to marry Jesus.
No.
Our goal is to love our wife as Christ loves the church, but we never will because we're not Jesus. Only he loves us that way. But you certainly want to see that growth in sanctification happening in his life, or there will be no testimony of loving you as Christ loves the church ever, because it's not there. So, all right, so
Well,
descriptive.
Let's look real quick, though, how Christ did love his church.
Yeah.
He hung on that cross. Mm-hmm. And the church wasn't perfect when he did that.
Was not.
That was love right there. Okay, so he's the model for us, not Abraham.
Not Jacob, not Isaac, not Abraham.
So now another story of our cheater. We're back to Jacob now.
Yeah.
Okay, by chapter 27, Isaac's eyes are getting bad, and they must be getting really bad at this point, or maybe he's in tents where there's not much light. So he's not seeing too well.
Yeah.
Jacob continues this campaign to not only take Esau's birthright, but also the blessing that goes to the firstborn. Mm-hmm. Isaac calls Esau to give him the blessing as the firstborn because Isaac could have died any time now. So Isaac sends Esau out to get some game and prepare it for him to eat. He likes that. Rebekah hears this. Now, Rebekah, she liked Jacob that hung out around the tents a little bit more. She started scheming. So before Esau got back, she sends Jacob with some good food she made. She took some from the flock. She cooked some good food for him to take to imitate Esau's food. Mm-hmm. So here comes Jacob to visit to Isaac. And he's also got on Isaac's, I'm getting my people mixed up.
Yeah.
Esau's clothing. So he smells like he's been out in the field hunting, getting tricky. Then goat skins on his arms and on his neck. So when you touch him, it feels like Esau.
Which, what a man.
Yeah.
My man feels like a goat.
That's right. He felt and he smelled like Esau. Yeah. And the food was good, just like Esau would prepare. And Jacob straight up lied and said he was Esau. Mm-hmm. So he's just right out. He's the cheater, just like his name said. So then Isaac blessed him, Jacob, like he was going to bless Esau, the firstborn. So now, not only the birthright's been sold, now the blessing that should have gone to the firstborn has gone to Jacob, the secondborn. Genesis 27 through 29. So he went to him and kissed him. When Isaac caught the smell of his clothes, he blessed him and said, the smell of my son is like the smell of a field that the Lord has blessed. May God give you heaven's dew and earth's richness, and abundance of grain and new wine. May nations serve you and peoples bow down to you. Be Lord over your brothers, and may the sons of your mother bow down to you. May those who curse you be cursed, and those who bless you be blessed. Well, Esau's taking a beating now.
Yeah.
He's whipped down on this one. Not only does he not get the blessing that he was owed, or that he was to get, but he gets this instead from Isaac. Genesis 27, 39 through 40. Here goes the true firstborn. Your dwelling will be away from the earth's richness, away from the dew of heaven above. You will live by the sword, and you will serve your brother. But when you grow restless, you will throw his yoke off your neck. So you can imagine Esau is not happy.
No.
This is bad.
This is really bad.
This is really
bad. What's really interesting is they tell him to go get a wife, tell him where to get the wife, and he tells them where to put it.
Jacob, they tell Jacob.
Jacob, and then you have...
And Esau's like, well, you don't want him to get a wife from there, I'm going to.
Well, yeah, Esau goes and ends up, if I remember this right, Esau goes and marries the daughter of Ishmael, the one Abraham has... All right, so the mess is getting messier.
Messier and messier.
The mess is getting messier. So you've had this illegitimate son... in God's eyes, that's not the one. So
through Hagar,
you cast out his mom. That can't leave a very good taste in her mouth. So you put Hagar out. She's about, apart from God taking care of her, she's going to starve to death. And so, and her son Ishmael's now grown up and has kids. And you go marry one of his daughters, try going to that
kid.
Thanksgiving dinner. You know what I mean? Like, this is going to get weird.
No, not good.
Yeah.
And of course,
which is a very interesting piece that Moses includes this, because it's already helping the people understand, like, there's tension in the land.
Oh, yeah.
Because those descendants didn't leave. We did. You're going to find out next week. Jacob left. Israel left. But those folks didn't. So when they come back, these are the descendants of these people. These are the folks who have the land. And you have to believe there has been oral tradition handed down that we don't like those people. at all. So this is not creating a good environment.
No.
And explains a lot of what happens when you get into the book of Exodus.
And even what continues now, because the Arabic people
Here we are,
believe
millenniums later.
that they are through Ishmael
They're the descendants of Ishmael.
to Abraham. Yeah.
So already when Muhammad comes along and says we're these descendants, we're already pitting ourselves against the Jewish people. So this goes back. It's just funny when you hear politicians say they're going to go solve it. You're like, y'all, this goes back for thousands of years, like thousands before Jesus. This has been going on. So you're going to go fix it. Go ahead. That'll be entertaining. We'd like to watch that. Let's see you do that. So Esau's path complicates things.
Oh, yeah.
Jacob, he kind of exits stage right. He takes off.
But Jacob, on the other hand, here's he got this basically curse has been passed on to Esau.
Yeah.
Jacob stepping up here now. We've been watching this promise. It came through Abraham. It got passed to Isaac. Now it comes to Jacob. Didn't go to Esau. Now, normally you'd think the older son would get that. He was supposed to. But no, this promise now is being passed to Jacob. Jacob stopped at a place called Bethel to sleep for the night. Put a rock under his head. Now, this is, I think, the early form of My Pillow, if you're familiar with My Pillow, except this is My Rock.
Yeah, My Rock.
For the best night's sleep in the whole wide world, visit myrock.com.
Myrock.com.
And there's Jacob. All right.
Amazing pillow.
Again, that's descriptive, not prescriptive.
Yeah.
He used a rock. We don't need to do that. But he dreamed. That's the dream you hear about, that staircase from earth to heaven with angels going down, going up and down with God at the top of the stairs. And this is what God is saying in that dream. I am the Lord, the God of your father Abraham and the God of Isaac. Genesis 28, 10 through 18. I am the Lord, the God of your father Abraham and the God of Isaac. I will give you and your descendants the land on which you're lying. Your descendants will be like the dust of the earth, and you will spread out to the west and to the east, to the north and to the south. All peoples on earth will be blessed through you and your offspring. And I am with you and will watch over you wherever you go, and I will bring you back to this land. I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. So we see that promise again, and that all the people will be blessed through you and your offspring. Again, now it has passed all the way down to Jacob. And of course, how do we see all the people of the world being blessed through them? Clearly through Christ.
It's going to be Christ. Yeah. It's certainly not through their actions.
Nope.
This is getting ready to get cray-cray.
Now Isaac, he instructed Jacob to marry a woman from the daughters of his uncle Laban. So he went, and he encountered Rachel, who was a daughter of Laban, and he wanted to marry her. Now we see the kidder get kidded. Here the con guy gets conned. Yeah, comes back on him. It's pretty clear that Jacob and Laban are related, even though we already know because it was his uncle, but now we know that they're by their trickery. They've got some similar characteristics, no doubt about it. Because here comes
runs in the family.
Oh, apparently it does. Jacob goes to Laban to marry Rachel and agrees to work 7 years in exchange for Rachel, which you seem to be happy to do. Well, then the big wedding day comes and the wedding night, and then the next morning, surprise, wakes up. It's not Rachel he's with, it's Leah.
And the Bible's so kind. It says she has weak eyes.
Weak eyes,
which is very well understood to mean she was ugly.
Yeah, that's right.
She was ugly. And it was a reason why Jacob didn't want to marry the firstborn. Because the firstborn, the eldest daughter, traditionally is the one who would have been married away first.
Married first.
So that's who Laban needed to marry off, and he was violating tradition to agree to Rachel in the first place.
Sure.
So Rachel he knew what he was doing all along.
He knew what he was doing.
He knew what he was doing all along. There was no way he was going to do this because that was going to break tradition, break culture, and put him in real odds with his own daughter, Leah. But I love how the Bible's like, she had weak eyes.
Yes.
That's just too kind. Moses was a kind fellow.
Oh, yeah. And so Jacob gripes about this. And Laban says, oh, okay, I did the switcheroo because you traditionally marry off the first daughter first. So the final deal was Jacob had to complete the first week of marriage with Leah, and then he was given Rachel as well. But then he had to work 7 more years to earn her. So that was what was required.
That's an often incorrect fact, people. They think that that he worked 7 years, got Leah, then worked 7 more years and got Rachel. No, he worked 7 years, got Leah, spent a week with her week, and then he was given Rachel after that week. And then he worked. Then he worked, which to his credit, he did it.
Yeah,
he did it. So we're about to see, Jacob is a conniving little fella, but he's a hardworking dude who sticks by his word, and he does it.
And Leah, she started having children for Jacob then.
Yeah, out the gate.
These were some of the fathers of the tribes of Israel. It's interesting how this goes. So we start learning now where these 12 tribes came from. It starts off with Leah. Leah had Reuben, she had Simeon, she had Levi, and then she had Judah. Now, Judah was the tribe of the great King David.
And Levi is the tribe that runs the temple.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so in Judah, of course, the great King David, and through the line of the great King David came Jesus Christ.
Yes.
So right there we see the lineage right on back to these stories. Laban's trickery ultimately led to Jesus' birth in a sense. Yep. And now Jacob had 2 sons by Bilhah, the servant of Rachel. That was Dan and Naphtali. Then Jacob started having sons with Zilpah, the servant of Leah, who stopped having children. They are Gad and Asher. Okay, we're talking descriptive here, no prescription.
Right,
here.
right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then Leah had another son for Jacob. He was Issachar. Then finally a 6th son, Zebulun. Then next, Rachel gave birth to Joseph. We know of his stories. And then in chapter 35, later on, we read of Rachel having Benjamin. And we've got all 12 tribes of Jacob had now been established. We're watching the fulfillment of this promise as we go here through this story. It keeps getting passed down. It's passed down to Jacob now, and the family of Israel really is born to these 4 women. Now, we don't have Jacob named Israel yet. We'll do that in a minute. But just for recognition's sake, these are the 12 tribes of Israel.
Yeah, and they're not associated again with a person's favor. This story isn't working out. I mean, Rachel only has 2 kids compared to Leah, and when you read the story, there's tremendous tension there.
Yes.
And Rachel's got to be thinking, well, he didn't even want to marry you. My dad is the one who connived this in. Why is God giving my sister the honor? Because it was, especially in our culture, women still find it's very, being a mom is a very proud thing. But I think the measure of being mom is not even close to what it was in ancient civilizations, where in our environment, women have so much. Even in the recent 100-year history, things have come so far where women are now given positions in society that we're not allowed to have before, and business, money, voting. We will eventually one day have a woman president in the United States. It will happen. But prior to that cultural shift in civilization, the only honor a woman could have is in her kids. That's pretty much it. Married, kids, and that is the end of your honor for the most part for 99.9% of women, unless you were a queen or a few positions in the Old Testament where there were a woman judge and different stuff. But so for Rachel to have no male offspring for the love of her life is just massive. To me it speaks in so many different things. But one of the pieces that I want to point out before we keep going. A lot of the racist stuff that's propagated, whether it's in the United States or as you really want to see racism get complicated, go to Europe and different places in the world where everybody actually looks alike. It's not racism, it's ethnicism, I guess, because everybody's the same color. So you get into this color thing, again in Eastern Europe. You have all these countries the size of the tip of your finger, and if we saw them, y'all eat the same food. We can't tell the difference in your language. It all sounds the same. You all look the same, but they've hated each other for thousands of years. So it's all rooted in ethnic hatred. So part of what happens is everybody tries to tell the story of their pure blood, of their honorable heritage. The same, Hitler talking about we're the Aryan race and the proud race, and fast forward in the American culture, white people are powerful and yak, and start assigning all of this magnificence to their heritage. Y'all realize that's just idiotic. It's complete idiotic. Your heritage is of people who are just as jacked up as we have here in the Bible. And when Christians ascend to this, you're ascending to this place of bragging on your heritage and your culture without actually paying attention to it. Your heritage and culture is that you worship a Savior who was born to the most jacked up bunch of mess effort, like a stealing, conniving, and it was born a descendant, not even of the people who were supposed to be the ones. So Isaac is the second born, then Jacob, second born, and then the woman who the tribe Jesus comes through is not even the woman that he wanted. Right. The temple is run from the descendants of the woman that he didn't want. I mean, so the two of the people that were like, no, there had to be an arrogance among the brothers, like, he actually liked our mama, you know, but this is who God chooses, because God doesn't care about any of this nonsense. So as Christians, run from that. Run from the nonsense of trying to go back somehow and showing that your heritage, your culture, your lineage is somehow some glorious epiphany of someone that has been set apart and is so different. We are all sinners, depraved and in desperate need of God, and there are none righteous, no, not one. I don't care what color you are, what your last name is, and where your heritage comes from. All right, so that was a unplanned side note. Okay,
that was
there
a good
we go.
one, though.
All right, so
like that.
so we got all these children running around.
Oh, yeah.
And things are going to get complicated with that, but we're going to come back to that next week.
Sure.
So the story dives down in a different direction.
It does. Now, Israel as a people, they've been established now, even though it's not called Israel yet. We'll get to that in a minute. Now, there's a very interesting story here. Jacob decides to leave Laban, and he's finished his time, served out his time to get Rachel. And even though he's ready to go, Laban convinces him to stay. But now it's with pay. He's not just working to get Rachel now. It's going to be with pay. And Jacob gets to propose what the pay is going to be. He says, okay, I get to keep all the spotted and all the speckled goats from the herd and the sheep and every dark-colored lamb as my pay. That's what I'm asking for. And Laban agreed to that. That's how it's going to be. You get those out of the herd. So then Laban, true to form, takes all the animals that are there that are striped or speckled or the dark lambs, pulls them away and gets them a long way away. He puts them a good distance away. So, okay, now you go ahead and take all the ones that are left that are spotted and speckled after you took them all. So Jacob, now true to form, Laban did what was true to form for him. He gets smart. He places sticks with stripes out of the bark, puts them in the water troughs so that the parent animals conceive while they're looking at the sticks.
Spots
and to make,
stripes.
they'll come out with spots and stripes, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, streaks. Okay. Now, so we've got Laban true to form with his trickery, taking all the animals away that were going to be Jacob's. Jacob true to form, he's being tricky. He's found a way to make this happen. Then modern man true to form says, that can't be true.
Right.
He says, that's magic. That is not science.
Yeah.
It seems it worked. So let's look at that. Jacob's numbers of animals increases. He's placing those striped sticks in the water. Seems to produce more striped, speckled sheep and goats and dark sheep. And even when they'd all been removed to start with, he was still able to get from that herd the ones that belonged to him, the speckled and the striped ones. Now, that's a big problem for biologists when they're reading this.
Yeah.
Because you know, this is what people used to believe a long time, that, you know, whatever the animal was looking at is going to affect however the offspring came out. And we just know now that's not how it works. So then maybe just for the modern biologist, see, God understands all that. Right. He made genetics. He knows how it all works. And I feel like he threw something into this story to just kind of let us all go, okay, we're all right. And here it is. Okay. Jacob had a dream, and God explains in this dream. Jacob said in Genesis 31:10 through 12, in breeding season I once had a dream, this is what Jacob's saying, in which I looked up and saw that the male goats mating with the flock were streaked, speckled, or spotted. The angel of God said to me in a dream, Jacob, I have answered, here I am. And he said, look up and see that all the male goats mating with the flock are streaked, speckled, and spotted, for I have seen all that Laban has been doing to you. Genetics were not quite what Jacob thought. Yeah. He was trying to use trickery. He was making this by trickery, but God was doing the work, and he's showing them this. This is the God who created genetics, who created recessive genes, where you can have traits from two animals that do not have that trait that come out in the next animal. And sure enough, there's the trait again. God was in control of this. Yeah. Animals that had those genetics the males were mating and producing offspring that would belong to Jacob. So even though he thought he was being tricky, yeah. But I think God maybe fed that to us so that we'd be able to say, okay, there it is.
Well, and I like
God
the
was
fact
in
he
control.
fed it to Jacob. He tells Jacob, your little witchcraft hocus pocus thing over there, that's not why they're this way. They're this way Of course, Jacob has no concept of genetics at this
No,
point,
nothing.
but there is at least a little bit of the understanding of it, because I think this is why Laban
God
takes them all
understood it.
away. Laban
Yeah.
takes, I'm gonna get all these spotted ones out of here, I'm
Yeah.
gonna get all these dudes out of here, and all he's gonna be left with is all these, sheep with no spots or whatever, and that's never gonna breed anything other. But God's like, nah,
The way God made things,
that's
sure
not how
enough.
this. Laban, you're not that smart either, because that's not how this works.
So Jacob's craftiness did not bring him his blessing.
It was God.
It was God. God understands and made genetics. All right.
Yeah.
And so at this point, after a period-appropriate genetics lesson, which we just had, God instructed Jacob to return to his native land in Canaan. Jacob up and left Laban without saying a word. Just left. Unknown to Jacob, his wife, Rebekah, she seems to have a little bit of the family traits as well. At least she's picked them up maybe from Jacob or from her dad. She steals the household gods of Laban's. So Rebekah then, just to make that story short, she managed to hide those gods, didn't get caught, and God actually directed Laban to basically let Jacob be.
Now, isn't it interesting? This is a seed to a problem that is going to be replicated over and over and over and over again in the Old Testament. Every time you turn around, they're worshiping false gods.
Yeah.
Every time you turn around, they're doing
Yep.
this. And so it's interesting, again, Moses includes this. That's not a proud moment in the history of Israel.
Right.
This is actually a defiant moment that the man who is going to be named Israel
Yes.
himself has married a woman, and more likely her sister's the same boat. They don't even worship Yahweh. They've probably included him, but even when you're reading this point, up to this point in the story, Isaac and Jacob are still not fully understanding who God is completely. God is still revealing himself to them. There's testimony of this throughout of their growth and understanding.
Yes.
And Moses clearly has a much better understanding of this than they do. But even Moses doesn't have the understanding that we have. Because we have the person of Christ, death, burial, and resurrection and ascension. We have the teachings of God made flesh. So just as an important side note, and we're going to pick back up because this is really getting ready to be interesting. Because Jacob is heading back home and brother Esau is there. And this boy ain't happy. Remember what happened? But as a really quick side note, I said this at the very beginning. It is vital that you don't, I think I did, but it is vital that you don't read the New Testament through the eyes of the Old Testament. That happens so often in Protestant churches. It leads to legalism. It leads to a total misunderstanding of the doctrine of grace. The New Testament tells us how to read the Old Testament. The plan of God is Jesus. The plan of God is not the Mosaic law and the covenant that God is establishing through Moses in writing this. God's plan is Jesus. So you have to start with the New Testament. And the New Testament will then instruct you on how to correctly read the Old Testament, because the Old Testament is ultimately about Jesus, but it's not revealed until Jesus. So imagine, I'll just say this. Imagine if you read the Old Testament before you read the New. It's literally like reading the Bible in the dark, because Christ is the light. When you read the New Testament, you've got the light. Now I know what's true. Now I know God's plan. And when you go back and read the Old Testament, it's going to come to life so much more, because you're going to see the depravity of man and God using man and God fulfilling his promises. The sovereignty of God is going to stand out. The grace of God to use these people is going to leap off the page at you when you really understand what the gospel and the teachings of the gospel. So we got Jacob. He's heading back.
He's heading back.
And things are about to get hairy. No joke intended.
His
Hairy
native,
Esau.
Yeah, Esau. Headed back to his native land. And of course, that's a complication for Jacob, because Esau, he stole his birthright. He stole his blessing. He doesn't expect Esau to be very happy with him or receive him with open arms. And so Jacob, he sends out some messengers. He sends out some messengers ahead of him. Of course, we're going to go soften up the ground a little bit for when he finally encounters Esau. And they came back with the news. We went to see your brother Esau. Now he's coming with 400 men. Yikes!
Yeah.
That wasn't very comforting.
That's an army.
400 men are coming. So Jacob split his people into two groups, hoping that at least one, the animals and the people, at least one of the two groups would survive this attack coming. And then he prayed. This is Jacob's prayer now as he's going to face Esau. Genesis 32, 9 through 12. O God of my father Abraham, God of my father Isaac, Lord, you who said to me, go back to your country and your relatives, and I will make you prosper. I am unworthy of all the kindness and faithfulness you have shown your servant. I had only my staff when I crossed this Jordan, but now I have become two camps. Save me, I pray, from the hand of my brother Esau, for I am afraid he will come and attack me, and also the mothers with their children. But you have said, I will surely make you prosper, and will make your descendants like the sands of the sea, which cannot be counted. So Jacob starts sending groups out ahead with hundreds of animals as gifts for Esau. So, hey, brother, look at all this great stuff I'm giving you. We're okay, right? So he's hoping to pacify Esau. But Jacob stayed in the camp while they went out, of course. He's watching from afar to see how it goes. That was the night then of the famous night-long wrestling match with Jacob. Jacob wrestled with a man until daybreak. Now, it's thought this man was an angel or God himself even. I don't see in the Bible necessarily that it declares that this was God he wrestled with. Yeah. However, he concludes the wrestling for the night. The man said to Jacob, when this all finishes up and he's not able to beat him, he's not able to beat Jacob, and of course he touches his hip and he makes it so Jacob's not going to be able to fight him more. He says, your name will no longer be Jacob, because you have struggled with God and with humans and have overcome. So finally, he names him, instead of Jacob, he names him Israel. So he says, your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel, because you have struggled with God and with humans and have overcome. So we finally now have the name Israel that's used today, the nation of Israel. And that's how that name finally came.
God strives also means he contends with God. Not necessarily the name you want. I'm going to contend and argue with God.
You'd rather have the name one who walks with God.
Walks with God. One who submits to God. One who...
hand in hand.
Yeah. So
victorious
it goes back
with
to,
God.
What you wrote on that, I stole your thunder. If Moses is making this up,
yes,
you can come up with a lot better name than he wrestled with God begging for a blessing.
Right.
I'm just going to go, man, there's much more glorious names,
Sure.
Some name that means God's glory is on me and will smite you if you come close. Like, he could have picked all kinds of names.
But this really happened.
But this actually happened.
And so you got to go with the name
reporting it as is. This is true history.
That's right.
Such an important point that you made there, especially for some of our listeners who are brand new to the Bible and are constantly hearing that these are just fables that people put together. Well, they're not very good at putting fables together. This is the one they chose. But we have Israel. We have the name that is now carried through, and that Jesus is born from and comes through to bless the nations, the promise that God has made. So how does all this kind of wrap up where we're leaving?
Finally, chapter 33, Jacob meets back up with Esau. Ready for the big battle scene?
Yeah, here it comes.
And Esau is receptive and kind to Jacob. Beautifully. So ultimately, we've come to the point in the story here of the chosen people of God in which the 12 tribes of Israel have been established, the chosen people. We have the name Israel now. The promise to Abram has been continued down to Israel, to Jacob, to Israel. And we have the early ancestral line of Jesus Christ. The human part of Jesus Christ has been established.
Yeah.
And that's where these stories have taken us. We're ready for next week now.
And there's drama. Look, we left off some drama that is indeed drama. Once again, we have foreign gods again in this whole deal. Before Jacob goes to meet with Esau, Genesis chapter 35, verse 2, so Jacob said to his household and to all who were with him, he had a bunch of workers and employees, put away the foreign gods that are among you and purify yourselves and change your garments. So this worship of false gods is still there.
Yes, it is.
Still a part, and it's a problem that is going to continue until Jesus clarifies. Well, let's say that. Let me back up. Delete. It is a problem that has continued even after Jesus. We don't have carved images